ADR. Promoting dialogue.
At 6 p.m. in Dakar and Bamako and 7 p.m. in Lagos. Good evening and thank you for staying tuned to West Africa Democracy Radio 94.9 FM in Dakar and online at wadr.org. Welcome to Newslink. First, the top stories. Late Malian Defense Minister General Camara laid to rest following a national and military riot in Bamako.
There is no need to reveal any state secret to acknowledge the decisive role played by General Sadio Camara in the effort to reclaim national sovereignty.
West African countries improve scores on Reporters Without Borders 2026 report.
In the rankings, fell 37 places to 120th. 5 journalists are currently detained in Niamey.
Senegalese government integrates over 2,000 victims of recent political violence into health insurance, and Nigerian authorities received 20,000 tons of mineral fertilizer from Russia ahead of planting season. Please stay tuned for details of the stories and more.
On the news, this is a more edit.
Many thanks for joining our broadcast. Newslink begins in Mali, where top military personnel, statesmen, members of parliament, and the diplomatic corps gathered in Bamako to bid farewell to late General Sadio Camara. The event was observed under tight security in Bamako. As you know, the defense minister was among several victims of the April 25 coordinated attacks by armed groups that targeted areas and critical facilities in Bamako, Kati, Gao, Kidal, and several others. While addressing the gathering, Prime Minister Abdoulaye Mega immortalized the late army chief for his contributions to the fight against terrorism.
There is no need to reveal any state secret to acknowledge the decisive role played by General Sadio Camara in rebuilding Mali's defense system in the effort to reclaim national sovereignty. A field officer deeply shaped by operational realities, he was profoundly marked by the occupation of northern Mali. General Camara emerged as a key figure in strengthening the armed forces, working closely with the highest authorities of the state. He helped redefine Mali's strategic defense priorities and gradually became one of the most emblematic figures in the struggle to fully restore the country's sovereignty. His calm but constant presence embodied a firm commitment to restoring peace and relentlessly confronting security threats across the country.
That was Malian Prime Minister Abdoulaye Mega speaking there. Well, as a reminder, General Sadio Camara was a central figure in shaping Mali's security strategy. His focus on sovereignty and military strength helped project the image of a resilient state in the face of asymmetric threats. That vision translated into the building and reinforcement of key military bases across the country. A discreet but influential strategist, he was also a pillar of the joint force of the Alliance of Sahel States. Now, Mali faces the challenge of moving forward without him as pressure from armed groups grows. Fighters from the OSIWA Liberation Front have already pushed for the withdrawal of the Africa Corps mercenaries from Kidal, leaving the Malian army with a daunting task ahead. For many in Mali, the late army chief will be greatly missed. Now, Reporters Without Borders, RSF, has released its 2026 World Press Freedom Index, painting a mixed picture of progress and decline across the globe, with West Africa reflecting both resilience and rising concern. The latest rankings show countries like Ghana, Cape Verde leading the region thanks to relatively stable media environments and stronger protection for journalists. But beyond these bright spots, the report warns of growing pressure on independent journalism driven by political transitions, insecurity, and economic fragility, especially in the Sahel. Veronica Njai reports.
For RSF, press freedom is more than just a media issue, but it is critical to democracy, human rights, and peace building. Sadibou Marong, Director for West Africa at Reporters Without Borders, explains what it means in today's context.
What we are using to define press freedom, which is the possibility given to a journalist to collect and broadcast news without being harassed legally, without economical constraints, without insecurity, given all those aspects.
Beyond the traditional challenges like restrictive laws, economic pressure, and intimidation, Mr. Marong highlights emerging and more subtle methods now used to silence journalists across the region.
Arrest was a pattern, but now in the recent years, the new pattern using spyware into your phone. When you are a journalist and you are arrested, if they take your phone, the first thing is they're going to try to search your sources. This is a very extraordinary pattern. That means if you are an investigative journalist, most of the time, if you are not really physically and mentally prepared, a lot of problems.
The report establishes the Sahel as a major area of concern where worsening security and political instability continue to challenge press freedom. Countries under military rule have seen sharp declines, with journalists facing increasing risks. Camille Mutagu, the head of research for sub-Saharan Africa at RSF, points to the alarming situation in Niger, which dropped significantly in this year's ranking.
Niger, which saw the biggest drop in the rankings, fell 37 places to 120th. 5 journalists are currently detained in Niamey. Regardless of the context, RSF believes that a mistake should be addressed through mediation or regulatory body, rather than prolonged pretrial detention.
As the world marks World Press Freedom Day this Sunday, the RSF report serves as a stark reminder that a free and independent press remains essential to building peaceful, accountable, and democratic societies.
Veronica Njai reporting there.
More stories coming up on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
Well, still on press freedom, the Ghana Journalists Association has announced plans to head to the Supreme Court over what it describes as a growing abuse of the Electronic Communications Act by security agencies to target journalists. The association says the move is driven by rising concerns within the media over arrests and what it calls intimidation under the law. It adds that it is seeking a definitive interpretation from the Apex Court to address the recurring issue. From Accra, Nadi Ditite reports.
Concerns are growing within Ghana's media space over what journalists say is a troubling pattern of arrest linked to their work, raising questions about state power and press freedom. The Ghana Journalists Association says the increasing use of provisions under the Electronic Communications Act, particularly those on false communication, is creating fear within the profession and could undermine investigative journalism. Speaking at a media engagement with national security, GJA President Albert Jumfor warned that applying the law this way risks turning civil matters into criminal cases, a move he says threatens Ghana's democratic gains. He insists the law was not intended to be used against journalists in the line of duty, adding that provisions such as Section 76, which makes it an offense for a person to knowingly send or spread false information through electronic means, are being misapplied to target reporters over their work. The association also warns the trend could erode gains made after Ghana repealed the criminal libel law, which moved defamation cases from criminal to civil courts. The GJA says it is now seeking clarity from the Supreme Court on whether the law can be applied this way, a decision that could shape media practice and freedom of expression in the country. Here is GJA President Albert Jumfor.
We are filing processes in the Supreme Court for Supreme Court to give us review on this act so that we will all be clear as to if the act was made for journalists or it is that the security agencies are now using backdoor. They've now found some solace and comfort in this act and using it to go after journalists in this country.
The Ghana Journalists Association further cautions that the continued use of the law against journalists could create a chilling effect, discouraging critical reporting and weakening public accountability. For WADR, Nadi Ditete, Accra.
And back in Senegal, the government is taking new steps in addressing the consequences of political violence that occurred between 2021 and 2024. On Thursday, the Senegalese Agency for Universal Health Coverage distributed 2,009 health insurance cards to victims of the unrest, a period marked by intense pre-election tensions. Presiding over the ceremony, Yusuf Jite, Chief of Staff to the Minister of Family, Social Action and Solidarity, highlighted the importance of the initiative. Francis Boniface completes the story.
Yusuf Jite described the initiative as a concrete commitment to strengthening social protection, saying the goal is to make support for victims a tangible reality. He also underscored the symbolic and restorative value of the move, calling it an act of social justice, national solidarity, and Republican redress. According to the senior state official, many victims of political violence between March 2021 and February 2024 still bear physical and health-related scars. Through their inclusion in the health insurance system, beneficiaries will now have improved access to public health care services. The scheme covers up to 80% of medical costs in public health facilities and 50% of medical expenses, easing the financial burden on victims and supporting long-term treatment. Beyond immediate assistance, the health scheme seeks to support victims at a time when demands for justice, reparations, and national reconciliation remain strong. As a reminder, reports of casualties during the 2021 and 2024 political violence range from 65 to more than 80 young protesters killed.
Francis Boniface filed that report. Now, the West African Center for Public Policies has launched its inaugural report on the ecosystem of public policies in West Africa. The document, backed by Trust Africa, offers a comprehensive assessment of the region's policy environment. Launched on Wednesday in Dakar, Senegal, the report also highlights persistent challenges, including weak governance, political instability, and limited domestic financing, as undermining policy effectiveness in the region. Frederick Ndeki, Deputy Executive Director of the West African Center for Public Policies, will join us much later on the news as our guest. In the meantime, Nigeria's Supreme Court has dismissed an appeal filed by a faction of the opposition People's Democratic Party, affirming that the party's Ibadan convention was unlawful. The ruling is expected to have major implications for the party's leadership structure ahead of the 2027 elections. Correspondent Iyechin Osasechi reports.
The Apex Court dismissed the appeal filed by the faction led by Taminu Turaki, describing it as lacking merit. It upheld earlier judgments by lower courts which had nullified the convention held in Ibadan, Oyo State. The court ruled that the convention held in November 2025 was conducted in defiance of an existing Federal High Court order. Justice Stephen Ada, who delivered the lead judgment, also faulted the faction for approaching another court of equal jurisdiction instead of appealing the earlier ruling. The court described the move as an abuse of court process. Meanwhile, in a related development, the Supreme Court has vacated the earlier order directing parties in the African Democratic Congress to maintain the status quo antebellum in its leadership crisis. The dispute within the party involves rival factions, with the crisis previously leading the electoral body to withdraw recognition of both sides pending a final resolution. Analysts say the latest decision could reshape the internal dynamics of the party and influence alignments ahead of the 2027 elections. For WADR, Iyechin Osasechi in Abuja.
In Togo, the opposition dynamic for the majority of the People coalition is calling for an end to the current regime. At a press conference in Lomé, opposition leaders criticized the government's leadership record and raised concerns over what they describe as setbacks to democracy. The coalition continues the rejection in recent political changes, arguing that they deprive citizens of the ability to directly elect their key leaders. Abdullah Hassan has the rest of the stories.
3 days after the celebration of Togo's 60th independence anniversary, the Democratic Majority for the People, DMP, has denounced what it calls 60 years of monarchical dictatorship in Togo. The political group is referring to the father-to-son succession at the State House. Opposition figures are calling for an end to the rule of Foya Singbe, who succeeded his father, Nyasingbe Eyadema, and has led the country for 21 years. According to Professor Adovi Go-Akwe, this statement by the DMP comes amid heightened tensions between the government and socio-political actors. A controversial constitutional change introduced 2 years ago, which shifted the country from a presidential to a parliamentary system, continues to be strongly criticized by the opposition. They argue that the system undermines democracy in Togo and is designed to keep Foya Singbe in power indefinitely.
Abdullah Hassan reporting there. In Liberia, concern is mounting over the state of pre-trial detention, with nearly 7% of inmates still awaiting trial. Assistant Minister for Rehabilitation, Gabriel Ndupela, says the figures expose a deep crisis in the justice system, where delays continue to deny many detainees their day in court. WDL's Monrovia correspondent Abraham Parker reports.
Liberia's justice system is under severe strain, with pressing figures revealing a deep backlog of unresolved cases, says Assistant Minister Gabriel Ndupela. Out of 3,768 inmates currently held across the country, about 2,650, nearly 70%, are still awaiting trial, while only 1,118 have been convicted. Addressing the 8th annual convention of the National Association of Public Defenders in Monrovia, the minister warns that inefficiencies and systemic neglect in the courts have normalized prolonged pre-trial detention. Other challenges include overstressed courtrooms and severe staff shortages for the management of caseloads, leaving many detainees stuck in indefinite detention while waiting for their day in court. Rights groups such as Amnesty International have been calling for urgent reforms to ease Liberia's growing pre-trial detention crisis in Liberia. To face the problem, the organization urged stronger investment in the justice system, including expanded legal aid and public defender services, more judges and court staff, and better case management to speed up trials and to reduce backlogs. For Newslink on WADR, Abraham Parker, Monrovia.
You're listening to Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio 94.9 FM in Dakar and online on WADR.org. Here is a reminder of the top stories. Late Malian Defense Minister General Camara laid to rest following a national and military raids in Bamako. West African countries improve scores on Reporters Without Borders 2026 report. Senegalese government integrates over 2,000 victims of recent political violence into health insurance. And still ahead in the news, Nigerian authorities receive 20,000 tons of mineral fertilizer from Russia ahead of planting season. We do have the guest interview and sports news. Please stay with us.
West Africa Democracy Radio. It's you speaking.
We are streaming live on WADR.org and also follow our live streamings on YouTube and Facebook. The Gambian Police Force has commissioned a national automated fingerprint identification system and a modern criminal records facility at its headquarters in Banjul, the capital. According to authorities, the system will strengthen criminal investigation and support justice delivery through the use of biometric technology. The event brought together senior government officials, security personnel, and development partners. WDL's Banjul correspondent Sangdon Amendi attended the commissioning and report.
The new automated fingerprint identification system is expected to improve the speed and accuracy of identifying suspects and managing criminal records. Inspector General of Police Sidi Mukhtar Toure described the development as a step toward evidence-based policing.
The commissioning of our national automated fingerprint and palm print identification system represent a decisive step in modernizing criminal identification and strengthening investigative precision across the country. Use of scientific methods reduces human error, thereby boosting public confidence in the integrity of our judicial processes.
Police data shows rape cases rose by 17% in 2025 from 46 to 54, while overall crime slightly declined by 1%. Arson and robbery cases also recorded small increases, even as thousands of convictions were secured during the year. Authorities say the system, implemented under the West African Police Information System Program with support from Interpol and ECOWAS, will play a key role in improving crime prevention, enhancing justice delivery, and boosting regional security cooperation. For WADR, I'm Sangdana Mendy, reporting from Banjul.
In Niger, the Russian Federation has officially handed over a donation of 20,000 tons of mineral fertilizer to authorities in Niamey. The handover ceremony represents an important boost for local farmers ahead of the planting season. Farmers have welcomed the gesture, describing it as a relief because global input costs have made farming increasingly difficult. Usman Ma reports.
The donation of a large quantity of fertilizer to Niger by Russia comes just ahead of the start of the rainy season's first planting period. Authorities in Niamey have welcomed the support, expressing hope that it will boost cereal production this season and help reduce dependence on imports. The Nigerian Minister of Agriculture, Colonel El Haji Osmani Mahamani, described it as a timely intervention.
Niger, true to its principle, will continue to promote balanced international relations that respect sovereignty and are focused on the sustainable development of projects. Our ambition is clear: to turn these initiatives into concrete leverage to improve the living conditions of our rural populations and strengthen our food sovereignty.
Farmers have also received the news positively, as the sharp rise in the cost of agricultural inputs on the global market has made access to fertilizers difficult in recent months. A farmer, Yunusa Musa, says the support comes as a relief at a critical time.
Nowadays, fertilizer is essential in agriculture. Without it, no farmer can expect good yields. We thank the authorities for this fertilizer, which has arrived at the right time. We hope it will boost our cereal production.
With the fertilizer now received, the key challenge for the Nigerian military government will be ensuring fast and fair distribution, especially in rural areas.
A report by WDL's Yakuba Bibulai and presented by Usman Umar.
Politics, analysis on major news, social matters, and all. This is A Guest.
Now, a new regional report is putting the spotlight on governance and policy effectiveness across West Africa, offering a fresh assessment of decades of public policy since independence. The study highlights both progress and persistent hurdles, from weak governance and political instability to youth unemployment and reliance on external aid. Speaking to WDL Deputy Executive Director Frederick Ndeki says the report provides a clear roadmap for more coordinated, evidence-based policies tailored to the region's realities.
This was the launch of our report. The report was made from 2024 to 2025, and it was around the ecosystem of public policy in West Africa. Among the 15 ECOWAS countries, it covers 5, and we made our focus on countries like Senegal, Guinea, Ghana, Cape Verde. This was a baseline study on public policies. Our main question was, despite all the good document, good strategies we have in our countries, why don't we achieve the results in terms of implementing public policies in the region? And the hypothesis we came up with is, it's not because we're lacking frameworks or the documents themselves, the strategies are not good. It's because of the implementation. It's because the implementations fail to achieve these results, and because there is non-appropriation by the citizens on law. And in framing these documents, it's top-down approach which has been prioritized, while it should be bottom-up approach. Make sure that there is this appropriation by the populations and making it easy for them to make the public policies their own strategies. The most striking aspect of this report is that we can see that in some countries, investments are being made, but the results are not coming. Like in sectors like education, we have countries where you have the youth are the majority and they're still unemployed, not well trained. And these youths are being used by armed groups operating in some of the countries, like in the Sahel, countries like Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso. They are being used like war forces and this armed group operating in these countries and causing security issues these countries are facing. The same youth are being mobilized, trying to escape poverty from their country and immigrating, taking risks, and you can see most of them dying on seas, trying to cross the ocean to reach other countries in Europe and beyond.
If the recommendations are implemented, what would success realistically look like for these countries? Because I did see that there are recommendations for each country in the sub-region.
will see the targets of these strategies, public policy strategies, reached in many countries. We'll see results in terms of education or even health achieved in these countries. Instead of having a lot of investments in the security sector alone, now we'll see these sectors also having investment from public funds. The other thing we will likely see that there will be reduction of corruption in our countries because the governance sector will be improved. Because we have good frameworks, we have laws, but we still have corruption undermining the development of our countries. So improvements will be seen in these sectors in terms of reducing corruption and increasing accountability from public officials.
Frederick Ndeke is the Deputy Executive Director of the West African Center for Public Policies. In sport news, the Confederation of African Football CAF has unanimously endorsed Gianni Infantino for re-election as FIFA president for the 2027 to the 2031 term. The decision was taken during a meeting of the CAF member associations held in Vancouver, Canada, ahead of the 76th FIFA Congress. CAF says its members are united in their support for Infantino's leadership as global football prepares for the next phase of development. The endorsement signals strong backing from African football for Infantino's continued leadership at FIFA. Meanwhile, Spanish giant Atletico Madrid were held to a 1-1 draw at home by Arsenal in the first leg of the UEFA Champions League yesterday evening. The Madrid-based club fell behind after Victor Gyökeres scored from the penalty spot to put Arsenal ahead. Diego Simeone rallied his team in the second half as they pushed for a comeback. Veteran forward Antoine Griezmann also scored from the spot to equalize for the Spanish side. The result leaves the tie finally poised ahead of the second leg in London next week, with a place in the final in Budapest still up for grabs. And we've come to the end of this edition of Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, 94.9 FM Dakar. Thank you for listening, and many thanks to Maado Juf and Mustafa Zek for the technical support. Let's keep the conversation coming on all of our social media platforms, X, Instagram, and Facebook at WDR English. I am Imo Edet. Good evening.
We thank you for listening to Newslink in Nigeria on Love FM Abuja and Darling FM Owerri. In the Gambia on Hot FM Banjul, Hilltop FM and Veritas Radio in Serekunda. Thank you for listening on Alternative Youth Radio Lofa County, Liberia, Radio Kegaman in Nimba County, and DCN Radio Riverses County. A big thank you to Radio Baft FM in Sierra Leone for listening, and in Ghana we thank Radio Pad in Damango and Royals FM in Wenchi. Thank you all for listening to Newslink.
WADR. You can listen to us on 94.9 FM in Dakar,